Good evening and welcome to the Planning Subcommittee A meeting. My name is Councillor Kath Whittam. I am the Chair of the Planning Subcommittee. Before we start, I need to make a few housekeeping announcements. This meeting is live streamed on Southwark Council YouTube channel. Members, officers and members of the public are welcome to wear their face masks if they wish. Thank you. Firstly, there are no planned fire alarm tests today. If you hear the fire alarm, leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is St John's Churchyard off Druid Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you. The public toilets are located by the main reception desk. This is a no smoking building. Please ensure you do not smoke on the premises. Please switch off your mobile phone or put your phone on silent while in the meeting in the committee room. Members of this subcommittee will not access the internet, send or receive emails, text messages or tweets concerning the business of the subcommittee. The code for accessing Southwark Council's free Wi-Fi is capital F, small r 33, capital W, small f, small I, exclamation mark. I'd ask you to please be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. I would also like to remind speakers to use their microphone when speaking, as only the audio from the microphones is captured on the live stream, and not to place your mobile devices next to the microphone to avoid interference. I would now like the officers to introduce themselves and explain their roles at this meeting. First of all, the planning officers. Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dennis Ongweme. I'm the Senior Planning Officer at tonight's meeting. My role is to represent the Director of Planning, to assist and advise members on planning and general issues relating to the application before you tonight. Thank you.
Abby.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Abby McGovern. I am the Planning Officer presenting and advising members of the subcommittee about item 7.1, which is Seavington House. Thank you.
Zaib.
Evening. My name is Zaib Khan. I'm the Planning Officer for item 7.2, which is Marlborough Sports Playground.
Catherine.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Jeter. I'm Design and Conservation Officer. I'm here to advise on both the applications, design and heritage matters. Thank you.
Legal Officer Margaret.
Good evening, Chair. My name is Margaret Foley. I'm the Legal Officer for this meeting. My role is to advise members of subcommittee about planning legislation and legal matters relating to planning, and to deputise for the monitoring officer.
And the clerk for the meeting, Gerald.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Gerald Gola. I'm a constitutional officer and I'm a clerk for the subcommittee. I'm here to minute the meeting and to advise on the procedure for decision making and on hearing the items. Item 2, apologies. Are there any apologies for absence or lateness for this meeting? Councillor Jane Salmon for absence, Chair. Item 3, confirmation of voting members. Please will voting members of the committee indicate by raising their hands. Thank you. Item 4, disclosure of members' interests and dispensations. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at this meeting? No. Thank you. Item 5, notification of any items of business which I deem urgent. The following additional documents were circulated prior to the meeting: members' pack and an addendum report. Item 6, minutes. Can we approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 5th of July 2022?
pages 1 to 5 on the agenda. Thank you. Item 7, development management. The following planning guidance is about the conduct of meetings. The next item on the agenda is the determination of development management planning applications. Before we proceed to the business, I would like to outline the guidance on the conduct of business. We will hear from the officer who will present the report, outline the recommendations and answer questions or clarify any issues raised by members of the subcommittee. Any representative present that wishes to speak can address the subcommittee for 3 minutes, which will be taken in the following order. 1 spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. You need to have identified a single spokesperson. If more than 1 objector wishes to speak, then the time will be divided accordingly within the 3-minute time slot. Then the applicant or their agent. Then 1 spokesperson representing any supporters of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site. And then a ward councillor representing those affected by the proposed development. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of their application. At the end of each representation, the subcommittee may ask questions of the presenter. After receiving all submissions, the subcommittee then will debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council subcommittee meeting which is open to the public. There should be no interruptions from the audience. Finally, although the planning subcommittee comprises of members of different political parties, we are not politically whipped. The decisions we make today are in accordance with the council's planning policy and based on information contained in the relevant reports and the addendum report, and any verbal submissions made today. How we approach these applications is set out in the Development Management Report at item 9. And if members are happy to note that report, we will move on to consider the planning applications. All those in favour? Agreed. Thank you. Item 7.1, Seavington House, Champion Hill, Southwark, London. Application number 22/AP/0174. Pages 10 to 60 of the main agenda pack, members pack and addendum report, pages 1 to 8. You're up, Abby.
Thank you, Chair. So item 7.1 is an application at Seavington House, Champion Hill for the demolition of 16 garages and sits and the redevelopment to provide 5 terraced 3-storey houses and a 19-unit 4-storey block of flats, providing a total of 24 new homes at 100% social rent. This is a council owner application. I would just like to draw your attention to the addendum that we've provided today. We have provided some additional information regarding the internal daylight and sunlight assessment for the scheme. This finds that 86 out of 93 rooms would comply with BRE guidelines, which equates to 92% of the proposed development. This information has been provided since the application came in because BRE guidance was updated this year. We've also received an additional representation on behalf of the applicant for the adjoining site at 1A Dog Kennel Hill. They have raised a few points regarding overlooking, separation distances and concerns around the boundary wall. This has generally been addressed in the main report and in the addendum as well. And just to note, there is a condition on the recommendation for boundary treatment details to be provided. We have provided an update to the heritage and design section of the committee report. Nothing here has changed. We've just provided some more information assessing the scheme and the impacts of the development on the conservation area and 47 Champion Hill against the requirements of the NPPF. There are a couple of amendments to the recommendation regarding conditions, including the removal of condition 15, which restricts developers, owners and occupiers from obtaining parking permits, because this would be secured through a planning obligation in the legal agreement, and just a correction of a date in condition 13. We've also provided a split list of the comments received on the application in terms of support and objections. And finally, we've advised that an additional informative is included for the applicant to work collaboratively with the applicant of the planning application at 1A Dog Kennel Hill with regard to the boundary treatment. So on the screen here you can see the site location plan. So it is the area outlined in red. And here is an aerial view of the site as well. And then this is the proposed site plan. So to the north of the image here, you've got the terraced properties fronting Champion Hill, and then the larger block of flats to the left of the image. Overall, the existing site includes 10 one-bedroom bedsits and 16 garages. The proposal is to redevelop this and provide 24 social rented homes, comprising 19 flats and 5 houses. The design of this is a 4-storey flatted development with a set-back top floor and 3-storey terraced houses. The overall housing mix is for 9 one-bedroom flats, 7 two-bedroom flats, 3 three-bedroom flats and 5 4-bedroom flats. And just to confirm as well, this wasn't included in the addendum, but paragraph 10 of the committee report is incorrect with regards to the housing mix, but it is correct in paragraph 36, so that was a slight error. And then in terms of the outdoor amenity space, there would be 275 square metres of communal amenity space. All of the homes would have private amenity space. A 360 square metre woodland area is proposed, and doorstep play space on the application site. So here are a couple of photos of the site as existing. The photograph on the left is the 2-storey Seavington house with 10 one-bedroom bedsits, and on the right you can see the garages, which are also on the site. So we've received 97 comments, which is now 98 with the additional one that was included in the addendum. This includes 47 objections and 49 comments in support. The objections relate to the design, quality and site layout in terms of building lines and the development being too close to the road, inappropriate height, scale and massing, being out of character with the surrounding area and impact on heritage assets. In terms of quality of accommodation, comments have raised the small size of homes and amenity space and impacts in terms of noise and pollution. And then in terms of neighbouring amenity, the proximity of the proposal to 1A Dog Kennel Hill, privacy impacts, daylight and sunlight impacts and noise. In terms of transport, it's said that the development is too close to the busy junction and creates a blind spot on the corner, that there is a lack of parking, there would be an increase in traffic and an impact on deliveries, a lack of wheelchair accessible parking, and loss of green space, trees and ecology, and impact on TPO trees. We've also had, so it was 49 comments in support. These refer to the efficient use of land, the fact that the existing homes have reached an end of life. There's support for affordable housing and family-sized homes, and the appropriate height of the development, which adds to the character of the local area and respects the adjacent building lines. There's also support for new play space, improvements in pedestrian safety, new planting, a high urban greening factor score, the provision of a green roof and the use of PVs in the development. So in terms of the quality of accommodation, 24 new social rented homes would be provided. This includes 62.5% 2 or more bedrooms and 33.5% 3 or more bedrooms, which complies with policy requirements. All dwellings meet or exceed minimum space standards as well, and all homes would be at least dual aspect. There are no wheelchair accessible homes provided on site due to level changes and site constraints. However, a £90,000 financial contribution would be provided and secured via a legal agreement. All homes have private amenity space and access to 275 square metres of communal amenity space, a 360 square metre woodland area and 110.6 square metres of doorstep play. So this plan here shows the proposed ground floor plan. You can see the ground floor of the terraced properties on the right there, and then a mix of the flats in the building on the left. You can see their balcony areas and then the rear gardens to the terraces, and the area to the south is the communal amenity space. First floor plan shows bedrooms on the terrace properties and again flats within the flatted development, and this is repeated over second floor, and at third floor just the flatted development where the terraces do not come up to this level, and just a proposed roof plan here. So in terms of the design, it's a 4-storey flatted development with the top floor set back and a 3-storey terraced housing, which would sit well within the surrounding area. A consistent architectural design approach has been taken across the buildings with an aligned fenestration and detailing around the windows. It's set back from Champion Hill and Dog Kennel Hill, with the corner chamfered and of an appropriate scale to not impact on the setting of the Camberwell Grove Conservation Area or the nearby Grade 2 listed 47 Champion Hill. The brick choice and colour is consistent with other buildings in the area, and a condition has been recommended for full details of this to be provided. This map here just shows the application site pinned, with the brown area is the conservation area and the green property to the left is 47 Champion Hill, which is the Grade 2 listed building. There was a previous application on this site for 35 units, which was withdrawn. This was submitted in 2018, and it was for a 5-storey block and a 5/6-storey block. These images here show the proposals. So the top image is a visual from the corner of the junction, and the other one is further along Champion Hill. And here you can see the proposed scheme and how the scale has decreased quite a lot as the scheme has developed since the withdrawal. Here is an image of the northern elevation. You can see the change in height there and the scale of the development. This is a southern elevation, so from the south you can see where the level changes are, with the flatted development there on the left. In terms of the impact on amenity of neighbours, I've provided this plan here which shows the separation distances between properties. So all of the existing neighbouring properties are located across public highways and over 12 metres from the application site, and therefore comply with the residential design standards. There is a scheme here at 1A Dog Kennel Hill which has planning permission and has been implemented, and there is also a scheme which is pending consideration at the moment. You can see here the separation distance at ground floor would be 13 metres, and then above this it would be approximately 14.47 metres, where this proposal is slightly set back above. In terms of privacy, outlook and sense of enclosure, all neighbouring buildings, with the exception of 1A Dog Kennel Hill, are located policy compliant distance. As mentioned, 1A Dog Kennel Hill has planning permission for 9 3-bedroom houses, which was a 2010 permission, and a planning application currently pending consideration for 31 flats. The image here again shows the ground floor of the proposed scheme with living rooms to the rear. These plans show the floor plans of the 2 schemes at Dog Kennel Hill. So the top image is the consented scheme, and it includes front doors and bathrooms, which would look towards the application site. So within the scheme in front of us today is living rooms at the rear at ground floor, and then the consented scheme is front doors and bathrooms. So there would be no direct overlooking here because there's no habitable rooms. The pending scheme has an open plan living, kitchen, diner across the ground floor. These are dual aspect rooms, so they have outlook, daylight from the front and rear. And so there could be some level of overlooking here, but as mentioned, they're dual aspect, and it would also be mitigated by a boundary treatment and landscaping between the buildings. On the upper floors, the separation distance is slightly larger at 14.47 metres. The proposed development contains bedrooms to the rear of the upper floors. So I've shown here the first floor plan and the second floor plan, and you can see the bedrooms. Within the consented scheme at 1A Dog Kennel Hill, you have living spaces at first and third floors and bedrooms at second and fourth floors. So Seavington House has been designed to limit overlooking between these principal living spaces by placing bedrooms on the upper floors, so they're not rooms that would likely be used at the same time. And there are no principal habitable living spaces within Seavington House on the upper floors. The pending scheme at 1A has bedrooms or dining areas of living, kitchen, diners fronting the application site. These are again dual aspect rooms, and because it's the dining area end, they're not principal living spaces, and again not principal living spaces within Seavington House. So whilst there would be some level of overlooking between the schemes, Seavington House has been designed to mitigate this as much as possible. In terms of daylight and sunlight, all of the neighbouring buildings, with the exception of 1A Dog Kennel Hill, comply with BRE guidelines. BRE guidelines state that the impact on vertical sky component value of a window is acceptable if the VSC value is higher than 27%, or if it is no less than 0.8 times its former value, and that in terms of daylight distribution, a reduction of 0.8 times may be deemed to adversely affect daylight. So this is a standard BRE test that we use, and this has been applied to the development. However, an alternative test has also been used, which is the mirror image test. So BRE guidelines state that a well-designed building will stand a reasonable distance from the boundary so as to enable future nearby developments to enjoy a similar access to daylight and to keep its own natural light when adjoining land is developed. So both of the schemes at 1A Dog Kennel Hill are designed less than 1 metre from the site boundary. So this alternative mirror image test has been used here. The mirror image test states that to ensure new development matches the height and proportion of existing buildings, the VSC, daylight distribution and annual probable sunlight hour targets, so the targets set out in BRE guidance, could be set to those for a mirror image of the building of the same height equidistant from the boundary. So just to show an image here, the mirror image test has been carried out and the consented scheme, which is in grey, has been flipped equidistant on the boundary, and this has been used to set the VSC existing values. So in terms of the vertical sky component and daylight distribution on the scheme as it is, 17 windows fail to meet BRE guidance. The rooms are all dual aspect, and therefore the daylight distribution test has also been carried out, where only 4 rooms within 1A Dog Kennel Hill would fail to meet BRE guidance. These are 3 dining rooms and 1 bedroom, which are again not principal living spaces. Looking then at the mirror image test, which is the mirror of the existing building, resetting the existing VSC values. They set the values very low to 0 to 12.48. And then this has been assessed with the proposed development in place, and the resultant VSC values would range from 14.59 to 39.23, which means that all windows would either experience no loss in VSC values or would experience an increase in VSC values. The proposed development will cause an improvement to the existing VSC values of 1A in comparison to a mirror image of itself. And then the same tests have been carried out for the proposed scheme at 1A Dog Kennel Hill. So looking at the vertical sky component and daylight distribution of the scheme in place, 35 windows would fail to meet BRE guidance in terms of VSC. Again, when this has been assessed in terms of daylight distribution because of the dual aspect nature of the rooms, only 14 rooms would fail to meet BRE guidance, so it would be 74% compliant. The rooms that fail are bedrooms and dining areas of open plan living, kitchen, dining rooms. So they're the plans that I showed when we were talking about the overlooking. And they have windows to the rear as well. In terms of the mirror image test, again, the existing VSC values have been set to use in the mirror image test. So the image here shows the proposed scheme in grey, and in purple is the mirror image of this. So it's slightly different to the consented one because of the change in the positioning of windows and the layout. The values would be 0 to 28.87 as existing, and with the proposed development in place would range from 4.56 to 31.61. Again, all windows would either experience no loss in VSC values or would experience an increase. The proposed development would cause an improvement to the existing VSC values of 1A in comparison to a mirror image of itself. In terms of landscaping, 275 square metres of communal amenity space is proposed to the rear of the development. To facilitate the development, there would be the removal of 13 trees, which include 1 Category U tree, 6 Category B trees, and 6 Category C trees. All TPO trees would be retained and would be unaffected as a result of the proposed development. 19 new street and courtyard trees are proposed around the development, and a 360 square metre woodland area comprising 121 new trees. So this is the area to the south of the image shown here. Conditions have been recommended for a landscape management plan, full details of tree planting, and a woodland management plan. In terms of play space, 110 square metres of on-site doorstep play for ages 0 to 4 is proposed. This is not counted within the 275 communal amenity space, so this is on top of that. It would be incidental and natural play items ranging from timber climbing frames to logs and grow gardens, situated in the pink areas shown on the screen here. And there's also a visual below. This complies with GLA requirements for ages 0 to 4, and then the remainder would be provided within the wider Champion Hill estate, and this is to be secured via legal agreement. It would be a car-free development which complies with planning policy. Future occupiers would be restricted from obtaining parking permits within the CPZ, which would be secured again via legal agreement. A transport assessment has been carried out, and the TRIX database estimates that the proposal would generate some 2 additional two-way traffic in peak hours. However, the proposal would be car-free and occupiers are unlikely to be car owners, so this is not considered when using TRIX estimations. So it's unlikely that there would be any significant impacts on the highway network. The building lines, including the Shamford corner of the development, are set back from Champion Hill and Dog Kennel Hill, which would allow appropriate sight lines. And 44 cycle storage spaces are proposed within a locker in the communal amenity space, which is policy compliant. And a condition has been recommended for a construction management plan. In terms of energy, for the B-lean aspect of the energy hierarchy, heat loss of the building would be kept low by using a combination of high performance building fabric, air tightness and low thermal bridging. In terms of B-clean, a site-wide heat network is proposed, and to be green for renewable energy, PVs and air source heat pumps are proposed for the site. Overall, the proposed development would achieve a 58% carbon reduction over Part L 2013 regulations and a financial contribution to offset the remainder would be secured at £32,870 within a legal agreement. And energy would also be monitored within the unilateral undertaking legal agreement to meet the B-scene requirement of the London Plan as well. So to just summarise the plan and obligations, the 100% social rented housing would be secured, a £90,000 financial contribution for wheelchair accessible housing, off-site play space, the removal of all parking permit rights in the CPZ, an offset contribution for carbon of £32,870, monitoring, reporting and verifying of energy performance. And that is everything that would be secured in the unilateral undertaking. So here we have an aerial view of the proposed development with the terraced housing and the flatted development. You can see the context of the local area here as well, and the consented scheme at 1A Dog Kennel Hill. This is an elevation of the terraces and an elevation of the flats. This is a view north from Estate Road where the level changes can be seen, and a view west along Grove Hill Road to the corner of Champion Hill and Dog Kennel Hill. So to summarise, the proposed development would provide 24 new social rented homes, so this would be 100% social rented, 62.5% 2 or more bedrooms and 33.5% 3 or more bedrooms complying with policy requirements, private amenity space and 275 square metres communal amenity space which exceeds policy requirements. Extensive landscaping is proposed, including street trees and a 360 square metre woodland area and doorstep play. It is therefore recommended that the planning application is approved subject to conditions and completion of a unilateral undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Well done. Any questions for the officer? Adam.
Thank you, and thank you, Abby, for an extensive presentation. Something I think has come up before. Could you clarify if the existing development is empty or are there still residents in it?
So the existing building has been decanted, but at the moment it's being used as temporary accommodation. All of the tenants were on short-term leases and were aware of this when they moved into the building. So there's no permanent residents there at the moment.
Okay.
Councillor Harper?
Thank you. Follow up on that question, which Councillor Hood asked. None of the comments in support or objections were from the address. Were the temporary accommodation residents consulted on the scheme or not?
I believe they would have been. I can check that. The list of who was consulted is at the end of the committee report.
I had a look and I couldn't see any Sevington House addresses, which is why I'm asking.
Okay.
We also consulted by site notice.
We did.
Yeah, we did place a site notice outside the application building inside.
Thank you.
Livingston?
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the scheme that was withdrawn, just to understand where that had got to in the process. Was that withdrawn before an officer recommendation had come forward, or at a later stage? And was it withdrawn because of the objections that came forward over height? Was that the reason?
Yes, so I believe that the scheme went to application stage. It had undergone some consultation, but due to the number of objections received at planning application stage, the decision was made by the council to withdraw the application. And then underwent some more consultation and changes to the scheme. I believe there was another pre-app, and then this application came forward.
Second question, which was about the 1A Dog Kennel Hill site. So just to understand, so there's an application which has got consent, and there's this revision that's coming along. Do you know where we've got to in that? Is that something that's likely to come forward in the form that that's been used in your projections for in the report?
Yeah, so there was a permission in 2010, which was for 9 3-bedroom terraced houses, and that's been implemented, so that can be built out. And then there's an application pending consideration at the moment, which was submitted in 2020, I believe, for 31 new flats, and it's been undergoing negotiations with viability and some other aspects, and it's likely that it will be heard at committee very soon.
Any other? Councillor Harper?
Sorry, Abby, just another question. On the support comments on page 9, one of the support comments is existing homes have reached end of the life. Is that also a view which is held by the council, or is that a kind of residents' view?
Well, if it was a comment made by residents, but I would assume that if the council are looking into redeveloping the site, then that is going to be one of the reasons behind it.
Any other questions? I still don't understand the mirror image thing, but maybe the sunlight daylight people will be able to answer that better. Okay, so we have next on the agenda is a objector. Now we have a Jonathan Paley. Come forward. First thing we want you to do is turn on your mic and say who you are and who you represent.
Okay, so my name's Jonathan Paley. I work for Craftworks Architects, and we're representing the neighbouring landowner for 1A Dog Kennel Hill today.
Okay. You time it. So you will have 3 minutes to speak, and then questions from the committee. Start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak. 1A Dog Kennel Hill, as Abby says, has got a prior consent, and we've currently got an application under determination. That platted scheme is currently looking to, has been submitted to provide affordable housing. So we are trying to meet the minimum thresholds for affordable housing, and we've got to that target. We've also had the consultation coming forward for the Seavington House scheme and looked to reorientate the internal layouts of the apartments, have principal living areas facing south to minimise the risk of overlook to the neighbouring Seavington House. So we're trying to work in collaboration with the council to make the two schemes work harmoniously together. It was our last course of action really to object today, because earlier this year in June we requested to officers that the boundary wall which between the two sites be reduced in height. That was on the advice of the daylight consultant. We also asked whether the 3.1 metre tall two-tier cycle stand that's built right on the boundary could be reduced to a single-tier 2.1 metre stand. It would naturally have to be wider, but could still meet that capacity requirement for the cycle storage. The recommended reduction to height, there's a secure by design requirement that the boundary wall must be a minimum of 1.8 metres high. We accept that. Whereas the boundary at the moment is drawn at 2.1 metres, we believe, on the northern boundary of the site near the road. But because of the site's topography, that increases to 3.1 metres by the time it meets the cycle stand. So it's kind of consistent wall datum. The daylight report for the council point 2 surveyors produced for the impacts to the apartments proposed at Dog Kennel Hill have shown the visible sky component, visible sky losses between 65 and 82% to those apartment windows at the back. They also didn't, so that's 3 times the recommended BRE guidance. We also had raised that objection in June about the height of the wall, but the wall was not modelled in that testing. So assuming that wall was built along the whole boundary to the 3.1 variable 2.1 3.1 metres, all our ground and first floor flats would have failures of up to 65 to 82% on the rear windows. We have asked that the council reconsider the height of the wall to make it 1.8 metres and to introduce a single tier cycle stand. We wouldn't have been objecting today if our request that the condition 9, which is for the boundary condition.
That's your time. Councillor Livingston.
Chair, it sounds as if he was almost concluding. Can I ask? Chair, apologies. It sounds as if he was almost concluding. Can I ask that he completes that point so that the committee are aware?
Very good.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we would request that the condition 9 be reworded to include the words that all boundary enclosure fences do not exceed 1.8 metres tall.
So is that your only condition you want changing?
Correct. We had also asked that the condition also include consultation with the neighbour. That's been included by officers and informative. I think it would be more robust if it was included in the condition. But principal objection is to the height of the wall.
Can I ask the legal officer if that is possible?
Well, Chair, I'm not the appropriate person to comment on whether or not the height of the boundary wall that's proposed by the objector is something that's acceptable in planning terms. So I would have to pass that issue over to planning colleagues.
Okay. Dennis? We can check with the applicant to see if they will agree to that, and we'll see where we are at the end. Councillor Livingston?
Thank you. Yes, I'm just trying to understand the proposal because, as you mentioned, this is a sloping site, and you mentioned it varied between 2.1 and 3.1. Are you saying that the 1.8 metres that you suggested should be the maximum height at the 3.1 metre end or at the 2.1 metre ends? Because obviously it makes a bit of a difference.
We'd request that the area as 2.1 becomes 1.8, as is the minimum requirement by Secure by Design, and the wall would step down to not exceed 1.8 in line with the topography.
Any other questions for the objector?
You said that we can check with the applicant. I'm assuming we won't be able to find out today, or we can find out today. Okay, great, thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm so sorry. I'm still quite confused about the sloping and the wall, and also where the boundary wall is on the plan. Would you be able to describe it again for a dummy, please?
So on screen we have what looks to be the ground floor arrangement of Steventon House, neighbouring 1A Dog Kennel Hill. The road to the right is Dog Kennel Hill, and then you have the kind of along the southern boundary with 1A Dog Kennel Hill, you can see what looks a row of kind of cycle racks near the tree. That's the 3.1 metre high cycle stand. And then you have a generator plant space, which is approximately 2.1 metres high, near the actual road entrance. So that boundary fence has been, as we believe has been drawn in the plans, it's a consistent Davidson from 2.1 and just goes straight over and hits the kind of roof line of the 3.1 cycle store. So it's a consistent kind of wall height. If that could be stepped down where the cycle store is to 1.8, that would significantly improve the daylight to the apartments along 1A Dog Kennel Hill. In addition to that, our original comment to request that the single tier cycle stand would also now, if it was to be 1.8 metres high, would extend beyond that. So we'd preference to have that as a single tier as well, but as a minimum, the condition to be reworded to have 1.8 would be beneficial for the apartments that are not currently showing daylight impacts.
Thank you, that was very clear.
Can I just check that you're not proposing to build out the consented scheme?
The applicant would like to develop the 31 flatted scheme and wants to start that on site next year.
If they don't get planning permission for that, would they build the consented scheme?
They're within their legal right to do so, but their preference is to do the 31 flatted scheme.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you very much for your presentation. If you return to the front of the front row, then if we need to ask you anything else.
Thank you.
Can we have the applicant or applicant's agent? So, Sonia, if you could introduce yourselves and do the 3-minute business.
Hi, my name is Sonia Watson and I acted as planning consultant on the scheme for Seavington for both 2018 and the current scheme. I think my colleague has done a tremendous job in explaining the scheme. Sorry, do you want to go?
No, Nicholas Healy, Point 2 Surveyors, Daylight and Sunlight Consultants.
Right, Dennis, you ready? 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you. As I said, I think that there's been quite a good explanation of the scheme from officers, so I don't think there's anything I want to add to that. Just to go back to the points raised by the objector regarding the wall, and specifically the cycle store. The cycle store has been put there because it was one of the only locations deemed acceptable by the Secure by Design officer, and the root protection, the reason for its location, why it's double storey, is the root protection zone of the existing tree, and the topographical constraints restricts the area suitable for the cycle store, and it needs to be 2-tier to accommodate the standards for the play area and outdoor amenity. and the numbers of cycles required for the scheme. So those are the reasons why I don't think that we would be happy for a condition regarding restricting the height of the wall. I think there is, what we've shown is a temporary wall, a temporary solution, because of the uncertainty over what development would take place at 1A Dog Kennel Hill. So I think we're happy to take negotiations further forward on the matter, but we do not want a restrictive condition on this. My colleague here will answer some of the queries that you may have specifically around daylight and sunlight.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask daylight sunlight person, do you agree with the findings of the 1A Dog Kennel Hill daylight consultant?
Well, I think the scheme has been very well designed to allow natural light to all surrounding residential properties. And the report points out that 4 of the 5 surrounding residential properties experience absolutely unnoticeable alterations of daylight. So the only consideration is 1A Dog Kennel Hill. This is a property which has been built right up to the site boundary. So it's an unsavoury neighbour from our perspective because it prejudices the design of or redevelopment of the site and also means that 1A Dog Kennel Hill effectively will get all of its light only from over our site. In my opinion, I would say the proposal has been set back considerably, about 14 metres, to allow good daylight for 1A Dog Kennel Hill and for our own development also. So I don't agree with the findings from the daylight and sunlight perspective. I think the scheme is very well designed to optimise daylight for both properties.
Do you think reducing the height of the wall make any difference?
I suspect redesigning their property might make a lot more difference. If you look at the proposal, they've got an additional floor in the basement with a significant overhang, which is going to compromise the amount of daylight that enters that property. So my consideration is that if the architects were that concerned about daylight and sunlight, they might consider a different design proposal for their next property in order to maximise daylight to their basement floor. If it were me providing recommendations to my client, I would always suggest that basements should be avoided if possible, and that overhangs above basement rooms should definitely be avoided because that restricts the amount of daylight and sunlight that those properties can receive. So I think the point about the wall is probably moot, and I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference either way.
Councillor Livingston.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to understand in design terms why the wall needs to be 3.1 metres at the western end. So I understand the height of the point that was made about the height of the cycle storage and why that needs to be double height given the constraints of the space that you're using. What I'm trying to understand is whether the wall needs to be that height all the way along. Or...
I don't think it is. I think it's 2.1 metres on the boundary fence. But there are different levels in height. But from our side, I think we've tried to make it 2.1. The cycle store is the exception on that boundary.
Okay. So the difference between what the objector is asking and what's proposed here, other than the cycle storage, and I understand that that's probably got the biggest impact, is what in old money we would have called a foot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Harper?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand why, if it is just a foot, you said earlier that you were quite keen not to have any kind of flexibility on the wall height, and I'm struggling to understand why that's so important. I often see, walls doing kind of steps. I'm not a designer, so.
I appreciate that. I don't think it's that we've not got any flexibility. It's that we don't want the condition, because we don't know what that condition will tie us to something that we don't know that we can deliver. So we'd rather have the flexibility of trying to achieve that and working with the applicant on 1A, Dog Kennel Hill, rather than being tied to a condition which says you have to do that.
Councillor Hood?
Thank you. I just want to pick up on something you said at the start about the cycle storage. You said it was one of the only locations. Can you just confirm if there were any other viable locations for that cycle storage or not?
Well, there were lots of there were other variations considered, and one of the criteria is we have to meet secure by design, and design and crime officer identified, and then you've got the constraints of the trees, you've got the play area, you've got the amenity spaces for residents. You have to kind of tuck it out of the way. We want to maximise the accommodation, so it was taken out of the building. We've already lost a lot of accommodation from the earlier scheme, so we're trying to make sure that we can put as many homes on the site as we can without compromising the quality of those homes or those nearby. So yes, but then there were other locations, but this is where the secure by design officer agreed that it should go, so it was located to that point.
Councillor Livingston?
Thank you. We've heard what you said about not wanting a condition on this, but saying that you might be open to further discussions with the applicants at 1A. Given the timescale that was set out by the objector for that development, would you be amenable for it to be a reserved matter that there could be further discussions involving planning officers to come to a conclusion on? I can see Abby itching to give an answer to that as well.
Do you want to come in on that, Abby?
I just want to confirm, I'm not sure if people are clear, that there is already a condition on the recommendation for details of the boundary treatment to be provided. So regardless, that does have to be submitted. The objectors just want the condition to then specify the height of the wall.
So is there scope within that for further discussion, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It still has to be agreed. This
Thank you.
isn't like not
That's
going
really
to be
helpful.
agreed. And there's also an informative saying to work with them.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Do we have a supporter in the room who lives within 100 metres of the site? No? Ward councillors? We have 2 of those. Would you like to introduce yourselves to the throng?
Hi, I'm Councillor Sarah King. Councillor Esme Hicks.
Dennis is ready with his 3 minutes.
I hope
you
the
are.
chair will be kind if we go over. I just really keen to start with, just to recap a little bit on the history of this site. So, as you've heard this evening, there was a previous scheme and the application was withdrawn. We first started engaging with residents back in 2016 on this scheme, so it's had quite a lot of history. What became clear quite quickly with that first scheme is that there were some real concerns about height, scale, and also concerns about losing mature trees on the sites, which have subsequently been TPO'd. It also came out very clearly that it's a really complicated site, and I totally understand why people have been asking questions about how it sits on a hill, and it's very prominent within the ward. Anyone who's been out campaigning will know it's our meet point, so it is right at the top. Following the scheme being put on hold, it was quite a difficult decision because we also knew that we were jeopardising delivering new council homes in the middle of the ward. But Peter and I at the time did agree that that was the right course of action. Since then, it's actually been really great to see the appointment of the new architects. They really, really strongly focused on sustainability. They looked at the typography of the site. They really cared about its prominence. And they also put a lot of emphasis on saving those mature trees and really reset the relationship with the residents. Lots of engagement followed that, and actually we had two, what I would describe as community leaders, in Steve Hedger as chair of the neighbouring TRA, and Sandra Renton, who is chair of the Grove Lane Residents Association, take really prominent roles, and they actually spent hours of time working with residents and officers to come up with what I think is a really fantastic scheme. It delivers really substantial social benefit. It's 24 socially rented units, but the fact that they're so significantly family-sized homes will make a real substantial difference. It's accompanied by an estate improvement plan, which really has been generated by residents of the existing Champion Hill estate. They've always asked for more play facilities and better play facilities. There are objectors. I do think it's important. I recognise that. But I really do think, on balance, that some of those existing objections are actually more related to the old scheme rather than the new scheme. And I'm also conscious you can't satisfy everyone on everything when it comes to a planning application. So just to sum up, I'm really proud to be able to support a scheme which I think if we all spent a few minutes, we could name the actual families that could be benefiting from it in the years to come.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the ward councillors? I'll ask you a question. Have you engaged at all with the developers at 1A Dog Kennel Hill?
I wouldn't want to... So I have no recollection of the applicant getting in touch to talk with me about the application, which does have consent, but has... I think I'm right that it was rejected. The application that has consent at 1A, I believe, was rejected by the council and was one at appeal. And I also haven't had any contact with the council. I don't think I've missed an email, but you know that it's possible I might have one, but I've had no contact with them in the run-up to this coming to committee at any point during the engagement process. I believe they do have contacts in the community that they may have talked to.
I haven't had any contact either.
You don't think that? I think the objector said that they were looking to provide social housing.
I will wait for my committee briefing on the application when it comes to committee. But they haven't engaged with us, so I haven't heard that message from the applicant.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming. So do we have any further questions for the officer? Anybody wish to say anything? Councillor Livingston.
Just very quickly to confirm that this would be, because it's a council scheme, that this would have a local letting scheme, wouldn't it? So that at least half the homes would go to people living in the immediate local area in housing need. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Emin.
Sorry, I had a question about the woodlands. It's not part of the unilateral undertaking, and I was wondering why.
So there is a condition for a woodland management plan. There's also conditions for landscaping and something else. But yeah, it would be secured by a condition.
So the person that came before spoke about the cycle hanger, and the secure officer basically saying that that was the best possible location. Would that be factored in at the same time when dealing with the landscaping? Because I'm assuming it's in proximity. Because she said there were some trees.
I believe there is a condition for the cycle parking to be provided as shown on the drawings that have already been submitted. So the location that it's in is what would be secured by a
Thank you.
condition.
Anybody wish to ask any other questions? Anybody wish to make any observations?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to I think useful to hear from the ward councillors the history of this site. I think we do all know that we are in desperate need of new social housing in this borough, and so I think this is a good scheme. I'm particularly encouraged by the 4-bedroom properties, because it has been a bugbear of mine where we have developments of social housing which don't include 4-bedroom properties, so having those and the 3-bedroom properties as well, I think is a welcome addition. It's useful to get that confirmation that people in housing need living locally to this site will be the people most likely to benefit from it as well. So I think this is a good scheme. It looks attractive to me. I know sometimes these things are in the eye of the beholder, but I quite like the look of it, and given it is such a prominent site on the top of the hill, I think it does need to have that high design standard. So I'm encouraged. I take on board the comments that were made about the wall by the objector, but I do think that we've obviously had that undertaking by officers to be able to look at that in a bit more detail, and so I think for me that feels as if it's a reasonable way forward. So I'd certainly support this scheme, Chair.
Shall we move to the vote? Okay, I would like to move to the vote that we agree the officers' recommendations as on paper, including any amendments highlighted by officers in the addendum report and conditions arising from the debate. Anything else?
No, because you've covered, there's an informative and amended conditions.
Including the informative?
Yeah, that's mentioned in the addendum as well. So
Okay. That planning permission be granted, subject to the conditions as set out in the report and addendum report and the completion of a unilateral undertaking. That in the event of a legal agreement is not signed by the 21st of December 2022, the Director of Planning and Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission, if appropriate, for the reasons set out under paragraph 110 of the report. Does anybody wish to second this? Thank you, Councillor Livingston. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. So planning permission is granted. Thank you very much for that. We will take a 5-minute comfort break before hearing 7.2. Everybody ready? Gerald, are we up? Okay, we'll move now to 7.2 on the agenda, Marlborough Playground, 11 to 25 Union Street, Southwark, London, SC1 1SD, application number 22/AP/2071, pages 61 to 101 of the main agenda pack, members pack and addendum report, pages 8 to 10. Zaib, you're on.
Thank you, Chair. Just to start off, I'd like to draw your attention to the addendum, which starts in paragraph 17. There's just been some updates to the original report. The first one is regarding paragraphs 15, 16, 17, and we've received 20 new contributions since the report was initially finalised. So those have been added in there. The next one is a reference to development plans. The previous paragraph quoted the previous London plan, so that's just been updated there for you. Paragraph 19 in the addendum references an addition, just making reference to the NPPF statutory tests on heritage assets. The following one, paragraph 17, the report, just outlines some highway works which were required. Paragraph 21 in the addendum pack, which is 71 in the report, makes reference to a construction environmental management plan. Previously it mentioned 2 pre-commencement conditions, but it is just 1. And lastly, the planning obligations have been further detailed for employment opportunities from the cafe and use of facilities, which are in there. So just to give you some context, Marlborough Sports Playground, designated borough open land just off Borough High Street and along Union Street. We've got 2 schools to the south of the site adjoining the playground. I thought this would be a useful diagram just to show you the different types of uses which are adjoining the site. Various commercial and school grounds, but also we've got some mixed-use commercial and residential uses in the southeast of the site as well. I thought this might be helpful, so this street view kind of shows Borough High Street, which is just to the east of that diagram there. This identifies the adjoining residential uses to the playground as well. So as you can see, in the Maple Building and Bridgegate House, we have residential within those buildings. They are mixed-use buildings, so not the whole building is residential, but the upper floors are. And then we've got 2 commercial buildings, the Royal College of Occupational Therapy and Alpha House. Just identifying some nearby heritage, we've got Union Street Conservation Area and Borough High Street Conservation Areas. This building, this site sits exactly in between both and adjoining both. Just some context on the site at the moment. Marlborough Sports Playground, open piece of land used for various activities within the community. So just to give you an overview, the existing site has a mugger AstroTurf pitch, some sprayed running tracks, a beach volleyball court, some shipping containers for storage and some Portaloo cabins. The proposal is for construction of a 2-storey cafe with some ancillary facilities, roof apparatus, renewal of games areas, cycle parking, landscaping for outdoor games, a viewing terrace, along with some planting and highway works. Design of the building, which you'll see further along, but just to give you a brief overview, is a 2-storey building with an undercroft. The maximum height is between 8 to 9 metres. The ground floor footprint is approximately 220 square metres, which is roughly 6 to 7% of the site area. The ground floor area includes a community cafe, toilets and ancillary storage. The first floor area includes 2 exercise studios, an outdoor space, a viewing deck and an office. The operation of the site is as agreed within the lease. That won't be changing, so that's 7 days per week, 364 days a year, excluding Christmas Day. And the opening hours tend to be 8 a.m. to dusk, which roughly is 9 o'clock. The site must be shut between 9 and 7 a.m., so that's within the lease. Just a point of correction, we didn't get a chance to update the tallies in this presentation, but they have been updated in the addendum. But the summary of objections and summary of support are principally the same. In terms of objections, there were some comments upon the negative impact upon the adjoining conservation areas, increased noise disturbance, the principle of development is inappropriate, poor quality design, and the development would reduce accessibility and not increase it for members of the public. Summary of support, enhanced facilities, increased accessibility to children, facilities would be an upgrade to existing facilities, good quality design, and increased community engagement with the applicant, which is Bankside Open Spaces Trust. I thought it'd be helpful to have the elevation and visuals on one slide, so it kind of brings the drawing to life slightly. So this is the proposed north elevation, which would sit along Union Street. You can see the undercroft gives it a bit of a skeleton view down the middle into the open space behind. And this is how the development looks from inside the sports playground looking out onto Union Street. You can see the pavilion and the viewing deck and the seating on this elevation. Of course, it includes that 2-storey building, but there's also other upgrades which are proposed across the playground, including upgrade and renewal of existing games facilities. Before we get to those, this is just a proposed ground floor plan showing the cafe, ancillary storage and toilet facilities. And this is the upper floor, first floor, which shows us two studios, outdoor classroom, office and viewing deck. We thought this would be a helpful diagram to include, which shows a footprint comparison. And I think this is quite important given that the development is upon designated borough open land. Currently the existing facilities, which include containers and portaloo cabins, take up about 50 square metres of the total footprint of the space. The proposed building would take up about 200 square metres, which, like I said, represents between 6 to 8% of the overall site footprint. So the whole site won't be being built upon. Just some wider amenities which are proposed. Obviously, we've got the reconfigured sports games areas, a new volleyball court, which surrounded facilities will be upgraded with a few more seats for spectators, a football pitch and some running tracks as well. In terms of daylight sunlight, we don't anticipate much impact at all. But I thought it'd be helpful to include this. So the most impacted neighbours from the development would be the 6 listed. On the left-hand side, you'll see an existing site 3D, which is what's currently as existing, and the proposed, which shows a 2-storey building, which sits along Union Street, which, just to clarify, is away, the furthest most point away from the residential uses in the southeast part of the site. All windows on 6 and 8 Union Street, including rooms, passed their daylight sunlight BRE tests. So that's 6 windows, 3 rooms, 6 Union Street, 10 windows and 5 rooms on 8 Union Street. There is an impact on 3 windows, 10 to 18 Union Street, sorry. But 90% of the windows are still BRE compliant. And Alpha House also 100% BRE pass rate. Same again with 27 and 29 Union Street. No detrimental loss. Overshadowing. This was quite important given the space is borough open land, and what we didn't want was too much overshadowing, which could potentially harm the openness experience on the borough open land. So we requested this in the daylight sunlight assessment, and it was found that 91% of the playground would still receive more than 2 hours of sunlight, according to how BRE guidance advise how these assessments should be done. So we don't anticipate that this development would impact upon the openness and have limited overshadowing impacts. Noise and vibration. This was one of the key concerns which residents raised in their objections. And just for consideration, the three overarching policies and guidance we had on this was the three listed there. The diagram shows some locations of where noise impact assessments were undertaken. I understand, well, I know there was a noise impact assessment which residents commissioned themselves, which got submitted to us yesterday. And I believe my understanding is that their consultants are here today, so you can ask more questions on that later. We have, the applicant has proposed sound mitigation, which I'll come on to. But I think it's just important to emphasise that there is an acknowledgement from the council that there is an existing noise issue on site currently that residents have raised, but this scheme does provide good opportunity to introduce new noise mitigating measures to help reduce that. One of the measures which have been introduced are these quilt blankets, which is like padded lining across the perimeter of games areas, and we thought that was a good opportunity to include some noise reduction mitigation. One of the benefits from this development would also mean that BOST, the applicants, would have a full-time presence on site, which means if there are any issues that neighbours would raise, they can be dealt with directly from going straight to their office. They'll obviously respond to neighbourly complaints, monitor and respond to any antisocial behaviour, and also enforce that too. In terms of management and operations, we'd like this development to have an increase in inclusivity for schools and community groups, and that's what the applicants have agreed to. That's within the Section 106 agreement as well, and how they commercially operating it is the fact that it will be hired out for commercial hire, and that would subsidise and keep free use for schools and community groups. The operational hours, like I said, would be as existing. That wouldn't change. And yes, that's it. And I think the final slide might be missing, but subject to the planning obligations, which are in paragraph 22 of the addendum pack, officers recommend granting this development subject to that legal agreement being entered into. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hood.
Thank you for your presentation. Just a few points I want to clarify. The existing site, is that actively being used as a sports ground at the moment?
Yes.
And the renewal of the sports facilities, does that introduce any changes to what sports are undertaken on the site?
No, they're more an upgrade of...
Okay. So it's just upgrading existing facilities, there's nothing new that's being introduced there. And I'm unfamiliar with the site when it comes to hours of operation. The hours of operation that are described in this planning application, are they different from what are existing?
No, they're exactly the same. So that's within the lease which the applicant has, and that's 8 a.m. till dusk is what the lease says, which tends to be about 9 o'clock from what the applicants tell me, because the site should be closed between 9 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Batterson.
Thank you for that. Could you expand a bit more on what's in the elevated the kind of north elevated section here. Does that include the changing rooms and other facilities?
Are you talking about this? Yeah. This would firstly, you're looking at it along Union Street. So the ground floor, it's probably helpful if I have to just show the full ground, this is a ground floor. That'll include on the right hand side, if you can see my cursor, that would be the cafe. That'll be a community cafe. One of the reasons why this application was advertised as a departure was because we didn't necessarily consider that ancillary to sports facilities, but recognise that it does have a community benefit and a benefit to the operation of the land. So that's a community cafe. We've got the washroom facilities here. The store on the left-hand side is storage for game facilities as well as the building. At the moment, everything's stored in shipping containers on site. What you see here in the middle, it's actually the undercroft. So these arrows here provide the disabled disability access and stairs there. And then the first floor has a outdoor classroom, viewing deck, 2 studios, and a office. So that's what the building would provide.
Thank you. Is this the building that is going to cause the restrictions that you spoke about in terms of daylight to surrounding buildings?
Yeah. So that's what it was assessed against, but there was no impact in terms of daylight sunlight.
Thank you.
Councillor Livingston.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to check up on some issues on the addendum report. This is me being exceptionally pedantic, so I apologise for that in advance. But in paragraph 17, you talked about the 50 contributions, 17 objections and 32 in support. Is the other one a neutral comment, just to check that my numbers add up?
Yeah, I realised afterwards I probably should have specified that, but it was a neutral comment.
Thank you. And that's the totality of all the responses.
Correct.
So including the ones that mentioned in the report. Thank you. And one of the objections raised was about harming of openness, which I think, for me, given this is borough open land, is obviously an important point to consider. I mean, it's useful, the photographs on slide 46 of the site. So I might need a reminder about the site, but the top right-hand 2 photos are, am I correct that those are the views along Union Street?
Yes.
Right, okay. So this sort of new gatehouse building that's being proposed is, could view it potentially as an improvement on the openness of that rather nasty looking fence there is along Union Street at the moment. Is that a fair comment?
Yep. Since you mentioned the openness, I'd probably also refer to the fact, in terms of footprint, I think it probably is a good denominator to kind of use in this instance. And to take up 6 to 8% of the overall site footprint, combined with the fact that 91% of the site would still receive adequate daylight sunlight, I think combined demonstrates that it shouldn't hugely impact openness too significantly.
But also, sorry, because I mean, obviously, openness is actually this is where I think sometimes openness is about how welcoming a site looks like, as well as in terms of that site from Union Street. So it was really, which may not technically be how planning officers look at it, I accept, but feels that it's an important part. That if because it does feel, whenever I've been on that bit of Union Street, that it doesn't, I don't know the area as well as some of the users, and I'm sure I'll be told I'm wrong by people who live there, but to me, as somebody walking along there, it doesn't always look particularly opening and welcoming with that fence there. Okay, thank you. Just to make sure that my recollection of the site are correct. Thank you.
Can I ask, maybe a better question to ask the applicant, but on page 65, paragraph 8, talks about the renting out of facilities at peak times, subsidising the use of the playground for other groups. Are there any guidelines as to when peak hours are and how long peak hours are?
There's not, but I think the applicant should be able to provide more information on that in more detail.
Now I've given him a heads up. Anybody else want to ask anything else?
I think it's also for the applicant because it was a similar theme of question as yours, Kath.
Thank you, Zabe. So we move on to objectors. We have a Tim Kipps. Yeah, would you like to come forward? First thing we want you to do is to introduce yourself and tell us who you work for before we start the clock.
So, my name is Tim Kipps. I'm a resident of Bridgegate House, and I'm representing my neighbours in Bridgegate House and the Maple Building. I should probably also mention that my voice is always this husky. I don't have COVID. You're all okay.
You have 3 minutes to speak.
So, I'm also accompanied by Torben Anderson from RBA Acoustics, who carried out the report that we commissioned. The first thing I want to say is that BOST, the applicant, are an amazing organisation. They're doing incredible work around the borough, and we fully support their aims, including Marlborough Sports Garden. It's a great facility, and in principle, we agree with what they're trying to do. So we're very reluctantly objecting to this application. As previously discussed, there'll be a new running track, cafe, spectator area, and a cafe with outdoor seating areas. And doubtless this is going to increase the usage of the facility. And I think that's BOST's stated intention, and it's a very laudable one. Unfortunately, we believe that the noise impact is going to be significant, and the existing noise affecting residents is already significant. So just to paint a picture of that, if we can hear the noise through double glazing, wearing noise-cancelling headphones while watching a TV with those headphones. So it's significant, and it's impacting our amenity. So we had this report commissioned, which I'm sorry to say didn't make it into the addendum pack, but some of you may have seen it. What are we looking for? We're looking for, we believe further mitigation measures are necessary. For example, on the volleyball court, nothing has been proposed to mitigate the noise of that. Some measures have been included, and we welcome those, but without full assessment of the effectiveness of the mitigation, how as members can you reliably assess whether this proposal complies with planning policy, and particularly the agent of change principles. We also note that in the report it says in point 62 that the proposed scheme is unlikely to make the situation worse, but again we would argue how can that be stated if these mitigation measures have not been adequately assessed. So I'd welcome any questions, and I to myself or Torben, my RBA Acoustics colleague. Thank you.
Thank you. You're well within time. Councillor Hood.
Thank you. Are there any specific mitigations you would want the applicant to take?
Our acousticians have been talking as the last meeting has been proceeding. The kind of things we want the best mitigation measures to occur on site, if possible, but if that's not possible, then mitigation to our residences may be a second option.
Would you like to come and sit up, please? Before you speak, Margaret, Can you explain the agent of change principle in this, whether it applies, because there's already games and things going on and noise being made before the development?
Thank you, Chair. The agent of change principle is referred to in the National Planning Policy Framework and is outlined at paragraph 187. And it specifically relates to new development which will have an impact on existing businesses and facilities. It is relevant where the operation of an existing business or community facility could have a significant adverse effect on new development, including changes of use in its vicinity. And that's where the applicant or the agent of change should be required to provide suitable mitigation before the development has been completed. In my view, that principle doesn't apply in the specific circumstances that we're looking at today. But I do note from the officer's report and from the addendum that the opportunity is being taken to provide mitigation to address some of the existing problems that the objectors have pointed out with the uses on site at the moment. Does that answer your question, Chair?
So basically, the applicant doesn't have to provide any mitigation because the noise is already there.
Yes, that there's possibly an intensification of use, but that is being addressed in the mitigation that's proposed, in the conditions that are proposed for you to consider in the report.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor?
Thank you. Sorry, my notes. I had a question. At the moment, the site's less managed than kind of the plans intended to be. I was kind of wondering about the noise and if that's a noise problem which continues past 9 p.m. normally or not, and whether, like, obviously, kind of everything else aside, whether if it is going on past 9 p.m, whether the kind of plans would also help that or not. And I just kind of wanted your view on, like the kind of...
Do you want to answer the timing one?
Timings of the noise?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the answer is sometimes they do go on because the lighting goes off about 9:15. And obviously during the summer hours, the lighting is not relevant. So, yes, sometimes it does.
Just if I can piggyback on the back of that, and it goes to the question you asked, in terms of the overall noise, the quantum of noise that's generated, I think some of the mitigation proposed in terms of the Muga will be beneficial in terms of the ball striking the outside of the court, which at the moment does make a significant noise. But there's nothing really that can be done for the noise of people playing football, and people playing football make a lot of noise because they need to call for the ball, etc. But we also have noise from the use of the beach volleyball court, and there's nothing on the table at the moment to try and mitigate that noise. And depending on which building you live in, the Muga affects you more or the beach volleyball affects you more, just because of the proximity of those. So while I think a lot of the mitigation measures proposed for the Muga court will be beneficial in terms of the ball strike noise, it does leave us with the position that there's nothing on the table at the moment in terms of controlling that beach volleyball court noise. And the other part is, as part of this facility becoming more managed, more organised, having the more welcoming environment, it's likely that the amount of time that people will be playing beach volleyball or beach football and using the Muga simultaneously will increase, and that does increase the overall noise. So the noise will be reduced by the measures to the Muga court, but actually you will get a cumulative effect more regularly, we think, because of these works, this intensification.
What would you suggest to mitigate the noise?
So, in the first instance, I think the measures that have been proposed by Boss Acoustician are entirely along the lines I would have done in their position, because it's the correct thing to do is to look to mitigate the noise at the source of where it's coming from, rather than trying to stop it elsewhere. But because of the nature of the noise source, it's a beach volleyball court. You can't put it in a shed. You know, there's not much that can be done to it. Then we are now in the position as representing the residents where we can say, well, actually, how do we stop how that affects people within their properties, so that we can then look at, well, actually, can we treat their balconies acoustically in some way, or can we replace their trickle ventilators that were probably specified when there was no real noise on that ground, or can we look at upgrading the glazing to some of those apartments to deal with the individual noise impacts that individual people are experiencing. And so those two elements together, I think, would be effective. But it's not a criticism of what's been done by Boss Consultant, because the first thing to do is to look exactly where they have done.
But do you accept that the noise is there already, and this application?
Yeah, it's
difference?
already a significant noise impact, and I think my colleagues
So
would
we
agree.
have to look at the application as it stands for this extra building. We're not judging it as an existing facility.
That's true. There's a significant noise impact, but even with the measures proposed on the table, there will still be a significant noise impact. And our concern is that the regularity of that noise impact will increase because of the number of times that we get simultaneous use. So that's where the change happens. That means it's not just we've got this noise, we're not doing anything to make it worse. That overall noise level of 1 hour a week, for example, may not change, but actually it may become 6 or 7 hours a week. And that's where I feel the change may come from.
Any other questions? The objector. So we're told that the applicant has agreed to enter an S106 for additional acoustic treatment of the balconies. No? They're shaking their heads. Okay, thank you. I'm just asking.
I'll come up in a bit.
Yeah.
What we have.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. If you'd say in the first, Councillor.
Yes, as you're an acoustics expert, I just wanted to sort of understand you. This may well be something for the applicant as well, but it was really to understand, because obviously I understand what you're saying about the noise being generated by people using the pitches and things like that, but presumably there's also an impact from that noise echoing about. I was just wondering whether you're aware of any sort of difference in the surface treatment that's being provided on the pitches, and whether that might have an acoustic impact.
My understanding is there's no proposed change of treatment to the beach volleyball court or the Muga. There is a proposed change of surface for the basketball court. I don't think that will have any real noise impact in terms of the reflections to the residents that look down on the facility. No.
Okay, thank you very much. If you could just turn the microphone off. Great. Thank you. If you stay in the front row in case we need to speak to you. So, Tim, who I've known for a very long time in very different circumstances. If you can just introduce yourself and say who you work for.
Okay, I'm Tim Wood. I'm the chair of the Banks Area and Spaces Trust, and I've got the architect here who designed that beautiful thing up there, and we are a
Are you doing the 3 minutes? Okay. And then we'll ask them up when we need to talk to them.
Yeah.
Okay, your 3 minutes.
Okay, I was going to brief history of this. I mean, this has been, the site, the Marlborough, has been a recreation ground since the 20s. It was dedicated to the borough by Consuelo Vanderbilt, of all people. We got involved in the late 90s and early 2000s because there was pressure on the council to develop it. There was a couple of commercial developers sniffing around, and we got it together with the council designated as borough open land in 2004. Flick forward to 2012, we did a pop-up mini Olympics there, which was so popular, festival running the week of the Olympics, that we, or our community gave us a hard time in putting those pitches permanently. So we got planning for the beach volleyball and for the Muga in 2012, so that's 10 years ago, and they've been used pretty intensively since then. This scheme, after a number of planning applications to deal with the lighting and the access and a bit of greening and all the rest of it, this scheme is a culmination of that 10-year plan to build this building. And I just wanted to say a couple of things about the building. I know the cafe is ancillary and seen as a diversion plan, but the cafe is absolutely essential to what we're doing. The whole idea behind it is a healthy food cafe. We're working with guys at St Thomas's on their childhood obesity program, and diet and food is just as important as activity and sport for kids. The highest level of childhood obesity in these two wards in the UK, which is a really sobering thought. So that's what the cafe is all about. And upstairs, the sports room that, as I was showing you, can also double as a classroom for education around that. So that's really important. But the other important thing is an office for our management team, because if we get planning for this and we build this, and by the way, it's a sill project. It's the first one in the borough. £1 million of sill have gone against this. If we build this, we'll be able to have a manager there from when it opens in the morning early to when it finishes at night. We're acutely aware of the impact of sport and the noise it makes. We've been working with Tim Bridgehouse and people from Maple as well, to try and mitigate that impact. Our acousticians have been talking together, and we will carry on talking to do meaningful impact. The reason I shook my head when you said what you said, we want to address what's meaningful, what will work. I think we're doing everything we can within the sports ground, but when it comes to people's flats, we want to know what will work and whether it's viable. We're a charity, effectively, and but we mean it when we say that, and we're happy with a condition to say we will continue to work with them to find a viable way of mitigating the noise impact.
That's your 3 minutes.
It's gone, is it? God, in a flash. As I say, they're here to answer questions.
I just have a quick question on usage of the site. So with the redevelopment and refresh of the sports facilities, what increase in usage are you targeting, or would you expect? Is it going from 1 hour to 3 hours a day, or what are you expecting?
The hours will remain the same. The peak hours. If you there was a question there about peak hours before. The adult sport, if you like, pays for the for the coach sport of the kids. So the peak hours for the paid adult sport is from around 5:30 in the evening to 9 o'clock, and that's the curfew, 9 o'clock. The lights go out at 1:15, and I think a managed leave will be a lot better for the residents, and that's what we're going to work towards to get that right. When they finish playing, they go. There is paid activity at lunchtime, but a big noise is when the schools come out, and they're out at sort of 3:15, 3:30, and the managed sport for them happens between that time and the commercial stuff starting at 5:36. There's also weekend kids stuff put on, and there's also holiday sport, and they're all programs, they're all coached programs, so it's encouraging kids into sport. And it's not about football, it's about all sports, so kids can get a interest in those sports.
Could I just follow up on that and ask, so these activities taking place currently, is there any intensification of them as a result of this redevelopment, so running more sessions more frequently, or does that stay relatively constant?
There's possibly, there'll be more sessions for the kids, certainly, but the hours of use for the commercial activity is pretty set.
Yeah.
And, you know, the point is that if the building itself will bring further income that will allow us to employ full-time staff to look after the thing, and also more coached sport and more activities for kids.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you. Yeah, it was actually a question about the commercial hire. On the schedule of charges, it notes kind of all day or weekend hire. I was just kind of wondering, is there kind of, you know, any limit to that, say in a year, how much it can be rented out for weekend for commercial use? As in, is there any kind of chance that every weekend of the year could be commercially rented out, so youth groups wouldn't be able to use it, or is there kind of a limit in place?
I think, and Jack might be able to correct me here, because he manages the place at the moment, but I think there's a self-policing thing going on here. We're allowed to have something like, I can't remember what it is, 100 events a year? There's more.
We've got a licence for 50 events.
Can you come forward
All right.
so your voice is captured on the live stream?
Thank you.
Can you
Hi.
just say your name?
My name's Jack, and I'm Head of Sport and Development at Bankside Open Spaces Trust. So, sorry, what was your question?
I didn't even ask it very well. So basically, I was asking about kind of commercial hire, and if there's kind of a cap on how much kind of the facility can be hired commercially. For example, like if it became an option that it could be hired every weekend in a year commercially, then obviously that would impact on.
Yeah, we have a licence which has 50 days, 52 days a year, I think, but we, like Tim says, impose a sort of cap on ourselves. So I think this year, for instance, we would run 3 full-day events, and then with our other partners, we might do an additional 10 days, which are sports days, company sports days. So I think, yeah, it's probably around a maximum of 20, and we're self-policing that. Because we have set programs at the weekend and during the holiday period those are the ones we try to ring fence and protect.
Councillor Batterson.
Thank you. How much of an increase in activities for children and young people do you expect to see as part of this?
I think the increase is going to be around the indoor space that we'll be able to provide. So as you see on the plans, the upper deck has the studio space, 2 studio spaces, so I think it's predominantly those spaces. Obviously at the moment we're slightly limited by weather, and our programs tend to run between April and October half term. So I think what this is going to allow us to do is to do more activities, dance, martial arts, the more indoor based activities, fitness classes throughout the year. And in addition to that, the workshops around healthy eating that we're proposing to do. And I think with some of the additions of the running track and some of the other upgrades, we're going to be able to provide more sports, more variety of sports throughout the whole year as well.
And has there been much engagement with the local schools about the indoor sports that you expect to see the increase in?
We have consulted throughout about the design itself. For our programme that we currently run, we engage with school and the school councils to find out what not only the schools want but the children want. So I think once we have a clear idea about what we have been agreed, I'll be back in the school councils and finding out what they want. For example, from the school councils, we found that they wanted to do roller skating to music, which has been our most successful and most popular activity that we've delivered. So that's one example. We consult the kids, then we know what they want, and we can provide what they want in those spaces.
Councillor Livingston?
It's just really to ask whether there's any more opportunity around the volleyball site for noise reduction, given the comments that were made by the objectors.
Should we mention what we've proposed on the eastern side with the greening?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have fast-tracked some of the greening proposals, so I think some mature planting along that eastern side, and although we recognise that perhaps that won't have a sort of demonstrable effect in terms of the acoustics, it will perhaps provide some screening and some division between the two sites, which is something that we picked up from one of the forum meetings which the residents attended. So we're trying to respond directly to the suggestions that we've received there. So that could make an impact.
And by fast tracking, we mean we're going to do that before we start the major works, because we've still got to fundraise the balance of the sill. So.
But just to acknowledge that the main noise, I think, is coming from the ball striking the fencing. So although it's on a different side, that's the main thing we want to address. And if we can do stuff around the beach volleyball court as well, then we will.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Please sit in the front row in case we need to speak to you. We have a supporter registered to speak. Tuesday, Barnett Simpson. You come forward, please. Thank you very much for coming. We don't often get supporters. So if you could say your name and whereabouts you live, but don't give the exact address.
You want my exact
building.
address?